Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of AETHER, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Rules of War, written by Bot99. Crap. The woman shuffled frantically through her notes before breaking into a jog to catch up to her colleagues as he strode down the corridor. Calm down, Jenkins. We knew this was coming. The Gravaxian modus operandi is well known. They were always going to declare war on us eventually. The man's voice was calm, but the distress he felt was obvious from the lines furrowing his brow and the tense stiffness of his gait. If we knew, then why didn't we do more to prepare? R&D's behind schedule. The Admiralty says the new fleet is only 80% complete, and our attempts at establishing an interspecies alliance had been rebuffed by nearly all our galactic neighbors. The Ovid are the only ones willing to stand with us, and that's just because they've even worse off than we are. The pitch and speed of her voice rose higher with each word, until she had to stop to take a few gasping, ragged breaths. A free hand fished around frantically in her coat pocket until it emerged holding an inhaler. She shoved the end into her mouth and breathed deeply. "We're not ready for this." Ambassador Wu stopped walking and turned to face her. He placed his hand on her shoulders and stared her straight in the eyes with what he hoped was a steady gaze. "We have to keep this together, Jenkins, because if you lose it, then I'm going to lose it, and if we both lose it, then there we're done. We're done. Humanity is done. Everything is done." He stopped himself when he realized the last few words had been shouted in panic, then saw the creases his white knuckle grip was leaving on the shoulders of Jenkins' coat. He forced himself to let go and flexed his hand a few times, attempting to relax them, before giving up and shoving them in his pockets. "But what are we going to do?" whined Jenkins as they halted outside the conference room door. The muscles in Wu's jaw flexed visibly as he swallowed hard, trying to get rid of the acrid taste that had infiltrated his mouth. Facing the door, he straightened his tie and tried to put on his game face. "We're going to do what humanity has always done best, Jenkins. We're going to wing it." Jenkins' reply died on her lips as Wu pressed the button and the door slid open. The conference room was unremarkable, just a long table surrounded by 4 nondescript walls without windows, pretty standard for Galactic Council Space Station. At each end of the room was a doorway, one of which they had just entered through. At the other end of the table was the Gravaxian ambassador, already waiting. "Of course he arrived first. He wants to keep us off balance. This is just a cheap political theater," muttered Jenkins. "He knew ahead of time that this would happen," replied Wu softly. "That's one of the benefits of being on the side declaring the war, rather than the one reacting to it." Gravaxians were one of the more aggressive species in the Milky Way, and brazen bullies to boot. Fittingly, their bodies looked the part. The ambassador resembled a mole rat that had been surgically grafted onto the face of a spider crab, except it was 7 feet tall. They had an unsettling effect on most sapient species, and they definitely knew it, using it to their advantage at every opportunity. An unseen third door opened, and the mediator android entered the room. It took its place at the midpoint of the long table, equidistant from the 2 combatant species. At their end, Wu and Jenkins sat down in the human chairs provided, while the Gravaxian, having no need for chairs, remained standing at his end. The mediator commenced proceedings, its synthetic voice ringing out clearly in Galactic Common. At 0.5 hours today, being the 10th segment of the 281st degree of galactic rotation, the Gravaxian hive, represented here by Ambassador Thum, has made a declaration of war on the Terran Republic, citing a breakdown of negotiations in this ongoing trade talks. As per Article 49 of Galactic Convention, we gather here at a neutral location to agree on the rules of war and allowed weapons. I, Galfed Arbitration Unit Designation 7-2, will act as mediator for these discussions. The combatants will now declare their intent to deploy any armaments classified as exotic weapons, those being any such weapons not listed in the standard means of engagement found in Article 53, subsection 6. The declared weapons will be added to the conflict-approved weapons list, henceforth referred to as the Call. Each combatant will be given 3 opportunities to veto any exotic weapons produced by the opposing combatant. Once the combatant has exhausted their veto allocation, they will have no further rights to limitation of the call, save their natural rights to seek and destroy such exotic weapons during the course of hostilities. Use of exotic weapons not listed on the call, as agreed here today, shall result in the forfeiture of Galactic Council membership and the classification of infringing combatant species as enemy of a council. Do you both agree to be bound by these rules?
We do,
said Ambassador Thum. His unpleasant voice sounded like he was constantly on the verge of expelling some kind of viscous bodily fluid. Don't have much choice now, do we? Said Wu sarcastically. Ambiguous statements are not permitted. A definitive answer is required, replied the mediator. We do, Wu grumbled, sinking deeper into his chair as he prepared himself for the onslaught of intimidation that was sure to follow. Satisfied by the response, the mediator continued. The Gravaxians, as the declaring combatant, may go first, said the android.
As is our right,
replied Thum, drawing himself up to his full height.
Get off your soapbox. That's what it just said,
sneered Jenkins. The mediator turned to face her, its disapproval obvious, although it stopped short of any further admonishment. Foolish humans! I'll make your personal deaths a condition of your species' inevitable surrender. I look forward to eating both of you, growled Thum. Jenkins flipped him the bird. Thum bristled, having been on the receiving end of such gesture once before, at the last council gala dinner. He had told a particularly offensive anti-human joke to a collection of delegates, and Jenkins had reacted by embarrassing him with what he later learned was an offensive insult. Plasma weapons, class 3 and below, he declared without further preamble. Only class 3? What's the matter? Scared you'll end up looking like boiled lobsters? Quipped Wu. Thum's teeth made a grinding noise, his frustration at the immediate challenge obvious. Fine, class 4 and below, he said. What the hell are you doing? Whispered Jenkins urgently. We're meant to talk them down, not up. Wu made a subtle, placating gesture towards her, his eyes still facing forward. Just go with it. I've got an idea, he replied. Agreed, declared Wu loudly, so that Thum and the mediator could hear. Aerosolized neurotoxic gases, said Thum, a hint of sinister laughter following the statement. Since their chitinous shells rendered them nearly impervious to airborne toxins, the Gravaxians were almost immune to such gas weapons when wearing protective breathing gear. Soft-skinned humans, on the other hand, were not so lucky. It was obvious Thum was trying to get Wu to use up all the vetoes before he got to the good stuff. Veto, said Wu immediately. 1 gone, 2 left. Thum chuckled with satisfaction. Thermonuclear explosives, both fission and fusion-based. Wu swore under his breath. Earth had a long and troublesome history with nuclear weapons and their radioactive fallout. Wu knew that the Republic leaders didn't want to let that particular genie back out of the bottle anytime soon, leaving him with no choice but to object. Veto, said Wu. 2 gone, only 1 left. Thum's chuckling intensified. Antimatter explosives up to 100 megatons, said the monstrous diplomat. Wu grinned as his embryonic idea unfurled further within his mind. Only 100 megatons? We had a little saying when I was serving in the Navy, Thum. If it's not at least a gigaton, then it's not worth dropping. What's the matter? Did your hive queen cut off your gamete sacs? Wu winced slightly as he felt Jenkins kick him under the table. He dug his heel into the top of her foot in an act of petty revenge. Ow, she blurted. Thum and the mediator both turned to look at the sudden outburst. Jenkins' cheeks quickly fished pink with embarrassment. It's what you'll be saying when you wake up to the second sun in the sky, said Jenkins awkwardly. Geez, nice recovery, Jenkins, thought Wu sarcastically. Thum regarded them both silently for a moment. Withdrawn, he said coldly, but didn't immediately suggest an alternative. Wu could tell that Thum was thinking hard, mentally reviewing the armory of the Gravaxians had been diligently developing for the last 1,000 years. That's your weakness, thought Wu. You're not creative enough. Finally, the Gravaxian looked up and locked eyes with him. "Mind-controlled slave shock troops," he snarled, with a hint of victory in his voice. Human revulsion to the concept of slavery was well known. Thum knew the thought of fighting and killing their own captured citizens was unthinkable to all Terrans. "Damn it, veto," growled Wu, angry at the dirty trick Thum had used. Now all his vetoes were gone, yet he knew the Gravaxians had a whole slew of horrible weapons that hadn't even been mentioned. Now they would be free to use them at their leisure.
"Ha! I've got you, Wu. You've run out already,"
jeered Thum. He then turned to the mediator.
"The Gravaxian Hive also reserves the right to deploy autonomous hunter-killer drones, mech-mounted incendiary cannons, germ warfare, orbital kinetic projectile bombardment."
The mediator addressed them once more. "The Terran Republic has exhausted its veto quota. Neurotoxins, thermonuclear explosives, and mind-controlled slave troops are hereby added to the list of prohibited weapons applicable to this conflict. The other nominated weapons are added to the cowl. The Terran Republic may now declare its intentions." Wu looked up at the list he had in front of him, made up of 2 columns. The first column showed the weapons that the Republic had already, or which were in the final testing stages. The second showed those still in research and development, but were expected to be ready in time in the short to medium term. Whether they would be ready in time to use in this war was anyone's guess. Time to play poker. "Antimatter explosives of 1 gigaton or greater," he said calmly. This was only a small bluff. The Republic had several antimatter bombs in the 100 megaton range. Surely the eggheads could just strap enough of them together to get a gigaton yield. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Wu heard the ethereal voices of 1,000 Terran engineers cursing at him.
"Veto,"
said Thum, gnashing his teeth in frustration. Terran Navy intelligence believed that the Gravaxians only had bombs up to 300 megatons. The veto indicated that they had been correct in that assumption. "Aircraft-mounted electric discharge lancers," said Wu. The lancers used arcs of electricity to melt holes in ground-based armored vehicles. Gravaxians weren't big on the in-atmosphere air support, but they did have a penchant for heavy vehicles. They would have been a useful weapon for the Republic if their R&D had finished. Maybe Thum would take the bait and veto them.
"Agreed,"
said their opponent. Nuts, thought Wu. Oh well, it was worth a shot. "Orbitally fired multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles bearing chemical explosive payloads not exceeding 1 kiloton." MERVs were nothing too special. Everyone in the galaxy had them. But Wu knew that he needed to include some of the more conventional weapons in order to lay the groundwork for what was coming next. He couldn't just shovel bullshit down Thum's throat and not expect him to get suspicious.
"Ha! This'll be a short war if that is the best you've got," cackled Thum. "Agreed."
"Oh yeah? Well, what's your stance on weaponized asteroids?" replied Wu, trying to keep his voice from sounding too defensive. That stopped Thum's laughing. Asteroids were planet killers.
"Do not try to bluff me, Wu. Humans do not have the capabilities to accelerate asteroid-sized objects to sufficient velocity for use in warfare,"
said Thum skeptically. "Care to bet your life on it?" Thum thought about this for a moment. The idea had been around for a long time, but no species had yet to make it work. The Gravaxians themselves had been trying for several decades, but a deployable technology was still a long way off.
"Veto,"
he conceded. "What a wise decision," replied Wu. "Laying it on a bit thick, aren't you?" whispered Jenkins. Wu pretended to check the pages of notes under the one containing his list. Unfortunately, they were all blank, although Thum didn't know that. "Quiet! Don't make him suspicious," Wu whispered back, trying to keep his lips from moving. He stopped playing with his notes and leaned back, trying to convey an air of nonchalance. Thum needed to believe that Wu thought that he was in control of the situation. "Diamond monofilament anti-personnel net mines," declared Wu. That was the thing, right? He'd read about them in a book once, probably a trashy sci-fi novel. Wu could see that this one scared Thum. Several species had managed to manufacture diamond monofilament, and it had proved to be incredibly sharp, capable of slicing through nearly anything. Gravaxian biology didn't really handle losing limbs very well. Their thick shells were hard to penetrate. But when they tended to bleed to death very quickly. Those facts combined made a potential monofilament mine a terrifying concept for Garavaxian ground troops.
Veto,
said Thumb eventually. He was starting to look rattled. This is it, thought Wu. Time to swing for the fences. Wu sometimes considered himself a bit of a gambling man, but this was a big bet, even for him. It was all predicated on the knowledge that Gravaxians were not adept at espionage. Their operatives tended to stand out in multi-species crowds, so spying and infiltration wasn't really an option. And their bullying ways had made them so hated around the galaxy that few species were willing to exchange information with them. They had always tended to adopt a brute force approach because they were unskilled in subtlety or intrigue. This was why Wu hoped their knowledge of the Terran technology was limited and that a bluff might work. Go big or go home was one of Wu's personal mantras. He put on the most relaxed and confident voice that he could muster. Luckily, Thum couldn't see how much his palms were sweating. Okay, with that unpleasantness out of the way, let's get down to the fun stuff. The Terran Republic asserts its right to deploy the following exotic weapons as per Article whatever. He paused for dramatic effect. Depleted uranium projectiles, real. Railgun rifles, real. Ship-mounted particle cannons, sort of real. Phased electron projectors, fake-ish. Still several years away, at least. Neutron splitters, fake. Out of the corner of his eye, Wu noticed that Jenkins stopped moving completely, even her nervous ticks, as she locked solid in fear that his audacious bluff would backfire. Quark nuggets, super fake. Wu thought he was onto a good thing and decided to keep going with the subatomics. Cycled proton erasers, super duper fake. Higgs boson attenuators. Wu could see Thum frantically tapping on his datapad, trying to pull up any information he could to confirm or deny the existence of these surely galaxy-destroying munitions. Anti-position destabilizer containment fields. Nonsense words were just tumbling out of his mouth now, but he could see that it was working. And lastly, Mongloon pion combobulators. Phew, that one's a mouthful. Wu nodded to the mediator, who stood up to speak once more. The Gravaxian hive has exhausted its veto quota. Antimatter explosives, weaponized asteroids, and diamond monofilament anti-personnel mines were hereby added to the list of prohibited weapons. The other, many and varied nominated weapons are added to the cowl. It is my declaration as acting mediator that the cowl is now finalized and binding and— Wait! Shouted Thum. Yes, Ambassador, said the mediator. Do you wish to say something before we close proceedings? Gravaxians couldn't quite sweat, but they did exude an oily substance from their joints when under extreme duress. Thum was glistening like a honey-glazed ham. Perhaps we've been a bit hasty in our declaration. I would hate to see two such upstanding species as ourselves engaged in the grubby business of interstellar warfare. Let's take another look at that trade agreement, shall we? I think I can see where we could make some concessions. Thum's voice seemed to have gone up an octave. How gracious of you, Ambassador Thum. I would be delighted to reopen negotiations and avoid this ugly mess, replied Wu, his voice saccharine sweet. Good. I'll have my office set up a meeting, said Thum as he rapidly packed up his belongings. Thank you, mediator, but your services are no longer required. The Garavaxian hive officially rescinds its declaration of war. Good day to you all. And with that, he swiftly exited the conference room and could be seen breaking into a run before the automatic doors had even closed. A long, drawn-out sigh escaped from Jenkins as she relaxed from a state of extreme tension. You did it! You actually did it! She cried. Elation flooded Wu's mind and body as he absorbed the sudden change in their fortunes and that of the Terran Republic. He bowed to the mediator and quickly extradited Jenkins and himself from the conference room into the corridor beyond. Then harsh realization hit him. Jenkins, he said. She was distracted, already drafting the triumphant communication that they would send back to Earth. Yeah, what? She replied, not looking at him. Get R&D on the phone and tell them that they may have to open up a few new lines of research. That trick won't work a second time. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters, Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.